Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we explore a current crisis. Sometimes the crises are within our own bodies. The Crisis Files wellness contributor, Jamie Martin, is here. Jamie is the editor-in-chief of Experience Life, an award-winning health and fitness magazine with more than 2 million readers. Did you know you have a nerve that starts in your brain and runs all the way to your digestive tract? The vagus nerve can affect physical pain, inflammation, anxiety, and depression. What you may not know, we might be able to control and even reverse some of the negative cycles. Jamie is here for the case file I call Vegas, baby. It's a pretty long nerve, Jamie. First of all, give people even more of a visual on that. Where is it? What is it doing?
The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in our body, and it runs essentially from the brainstem all the way down deep into the digestive tract. But along the way, it essentially has outshoots that connect and touch on basically all of the organs in our bodies, from our heart and lungs to our gallbladder and our spleen. And really what it is, it's a form of bilateral communication that happens between all of those systems in our brain. So basically, they're talking to one another and kind of responding in real time to the different needs of the various parts of our body.
That is just fascinating.
Yes.
There's been a lot of talk of the gut over the last decade. And this vagus nerve is part of the autonomic nervous system and central to gut-brain connection.
Absolutely. So when you think about that kind of fluttery feeling that you get in your stomach, you know, when you're nervous or scared or whatever that is, that's kind of essentially like the vagus nerve and the brain talking is what's happening there. And so there's a lot of messages that are going back and forth. And that vagus nerve is really, like you mentioned, it's part of the autonomic nervous system. So it has effects on both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. That sympathetic nervous system being that flight or fight response, whereas parasympathetic is rest and digest. When essentially like we're stuck in overdrive, when that sympathetic nervous system is kind of just keeps on going, we're in a state of chronic stress or inflammation, our vagus nerve essentially is not being stimulated, but we can stimulate it, activating the parasympathetic nervous system to kind of bring ourselves back into a better state of calm and ideally better health. But that requires vagal tone.
Vagal tone. Oh, yeah, let's get into vagal tone. So just to be clear, we need the sympathetic and the parasympathetic.
Absolutely.
We need to be active. We also need to have rest and be calm.
Yes.
The body needs both.
Well, and I think if you think of where our culture is, oftentimes you think we're always on the go. There's a lot of stressful things happening. Many of us are constantly connected to devices, and so we're always stimulated. And that can have effects on us, both physiological and psychological. And we know that the vagus nerve, like when it's in a healthy state, can actually help us in those spaces. You know, we talk about that gut-brain connection. When our vagal tone is good, it can actually help with conditions like irritable bowel disorders. So there's all of these connections between where we are and from a physiological state, whether we're really stressed out or we're in a pretty good state of calm, that can affect our health as a whole.
You mentioned vagal tone.
Yes.
What is that?
Essentially, it's the health of the vagus nerve. And so if the vagal nerve is kind of overreactive or stuck on overdrive, it's essentially not a great place. And then if it's a healthier vagal tone, it's calmer. We're in a more balanced state, so to speak. And one way that they look at vagal tone is through HRV, or heart rate variability. And this is essentially of the measure of the space between your heartbeats. And while it sounds counterintuitive, a higher HRV is actually indicative of a healthier vagal tone, and a lower HRV is indicative of a less healthy vagal tone.
Got it. Very interesting. Okay, this is just fascinating. Give people a sense of what are some of that negative when the vagus nerve is off and vagal tone is bad. You mentioned inflammation. We've heard about depression, anxiety. I'm really curious because I'm a migraine sufferer that there are some therapies with the vagal nerve that could help me with my migraines and millions of others out there.
So there are things that we can do on our own, as well as there are kind of medical interventions and some higher tech things that we can integrate into our lives to help stimulate our vagus nerve for better health. There's something called transcutaneous vagal nerve stimulation, and that is something that's been used in the medical setting to treat epileptic seizures for several years now. That is a device that's actually implanted, and there needs to be more research done in terms of how that could help us with other health conditions. But there are also external TVNS systems that can help people as well. There's some that are electrical and they could go around the neck. It's almost like a necklace that you would wear, and it stimulates like the cervical branch of the vagus nerve from your neck. There are also ones that can be used in the ear to stimulate as well. And that can help bring that vagal tone into a healthier state. But then again, there's things that we can do on our own, which I think this is the thing that's great from like, we know that there are times when we get really stressed out, whether it's like driving in your car or wherever. It's like, really it starts with even taking deep breaths, practicing, 3 deep breaths. That's really great for stimulating and activating that vagus nerve. And just think about it. You take a breath in for 4 breaths, pause, exhale for 5 to 6 breaths, what that does. So that's something you can do in your car, on the go.
Absolutely. And I think about, because many people out there do yoga. I try to do yoga once or twice a week. I end up having to go to a class at my health club. But the classes I do are specifically long hold classes. They're not the active ones. But any kind of yoga, you're doing really deep breathing.
Yes.
And my guess is that is helping the vagus nerve.
Absolutely. And that's what's nice about that is you're doing that a couple times a week. So when you're not in those classes, you kind of have the training to be able to come back to that breath in those moments of stress or anxiety or when things are not going well, when we're stuck in that overdrive mode.
I love even that gargling
Yes.
can help stimulate the vagus nerve.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. Like kind of first thing in the morning, right before you go to bed at night, take a few minutes and gargle water. It like stimulates something in that kind of throat, and it kind of keeps things moving in that vagus nerve.
I mean,
even splashing cold water on your face, they say it activates, it's called the diver's reflex, which can help slow the heart rate.
This is fabulous because some of these things are no cost. And you can at least start there. And certainly these are things to talk about with your doctor too.
Absolutely. And this is something that's becoming more common, especially when it comes to the transcutaneous vagus nerve stimulation. There are different methods for that. Again, there are some that you can buy on your own. Like you think about, they're the TENS units. They're the transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulators that you can get. And you think about those, you might see them in a chiropractor's office where you can put them on different spots on your back or whatever, but they can help to stimulate the nerve as well. So that's something you can get on your own. But then there's other methods that you can work with a healthcare provider on. And in particular, those implanted devices are the ones that you're going to be working with a medical provider for. Again, they're primarily used for epileptic seizures most recently, but they're being studied as ways to help with other health conditions too.
Well, just in general, and for you, as the editor-in-chief, as well as your writers for the magazine, I mean, you're really bringing us cutting-edge things, making it more mainstream and accessible for all of us. That's why I wanted you to talk about this, also because the vagus nerve just sounds really cool. And it really deserves its own episode on the Crisis Files. But what can you tell us about just how far along and how advanced treatments just are in general? Things are not as clunky in general. I mean, obviously, if someone has brain cancer, that's not something you can just fix on your own.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fascinating and feels really positive. There's so much hope for just regular chronic syndromes or issues.
And I think when it comes to a lot of chronic health conditions, there's new research coming out all the time about how that can be addressed in the medical settings and all of that. But I think so often what we're finding and reporting on in Experience Life is with a lot of chronic lifestyle-related conditions. You think about high blood pressure as an example. There are a lot of things we can do in our own daily lives that really are supportive of kind of reversing the effects, have been found to be able to reverse the effects of some of these chronic conditions in our bodies. It's time in nature, a regular and consistent movement routine and exercise program. Those are kind of they're different slightly. Whole foods diet, eating healthy most of the time, social connections. I mean, we come back to those things time and time again for a lot of these health conditions that are affecting so many of us now because many of them are lifestyle related. And there are things that we can do in our lives to make a difference and hopefully find some relief and healing.
Yeah, it's really fascinating when we think about all of the ways and the advances that have made in medicine, but so much also comes back to basic, simple methods. So when we talk about lifestyle habits.
Yep.
There are things about sleep, regular exercise, time in nature that also help the vagus nerve.
Absolutely, because it's really coming down to how do we activate that parasympathetic response that helps to deactivate the sympathetic responses. Again, in this busy and stressed out society that we live in, if we're stuck in that overdrive mode, if everything feels like a threat in our world, we have to have tools and resources that we can go back to help us reverse that. And again, these are all things that in many cases are at our fingertips. When I talk about movement patterns, it doesn't have to be, an hour at the health club necessarily. It's an hour out for a walk by yourself. It's like finding ways to move more in your daily life are really, really important in addition to a regular exercise program, for instance. So that's one example of things that we have a measure of control over that can help make a difference, in terms of, activating our vagus nerve for the benefit of our health, but also could have other downstream effects in terms of our health and well-being as a whole.
Are there any things when it comes to food and drinks that affect, for the good or for the bad, the vagus nerve?
I don't know that specifically. I mean, we do know that sugar and foods that tend to be inflammatory are not great because we know that the vagus nerve is very closely tied to inflammation. So it's, again, watching for those foods, probably highly processed foods, things that are not showing up in their close to its original form as possible are the things that are likely going to be more inflammatory for us and put our bodies in kind of a more stressed out reactive state, a more inflammatory state.
All right, I love it. Vegas, baby. Thank you, Jamie, for taking us on this body journey. Check out more about the vagus nerve and all things that the magazine has to offer on Instagram at Experience Life Magazine or online at experiencelife.com. Today's Crisis Brief is brought to you by Asset HR. Number 1. The vagus nerve is tied to both the fight or flight and the rest and digest mechanisms in our bodies. Number 2, simple ways to activate the vagus nerve include slow breathing, humming, chanting, and gargling. Number 3, for full details about the vagus nerve, check out the November-December 2024 issue of Experience Life magazine. Asset HR's unwavering commitment to exceptional service means they always maintain full dedication to existing clients. They believe in giving back by investing in the communities they serve. By fostering strong relationships and contributing to meaningful projects, Asset HR makes a lasting impact in the lives of the people they serve. Choose Asset HR and experience an HR partnership where relationships are paramount. Learn more at assethr.com. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Check out our website, thecrisisfiles.com, to catch up on all case files and to send us ideas for new ones. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.